Now comes to set up the Iscsi configuration on the VMware host. So I've logged in using the vSphere client, and the first thing we're going to do is set up the networking. So we're going to add a new VM kernel. Now VM kernel manages things other than just normal network traffic, so it generally handles things like iSCSI, vMotion, and host management. We're going to select a NIC that we're going to use. We're going to, in this case, just use the one for the moment, and we're going to use VM NIC 7. Okay. And name this iSCSI. We're going to leave it on the default VLAN. This is something that we will come back to later, and we're going to leave it as a standard IP network. We need to give this an IP address, so from our planning spreadsheet we know we're going to give the iSCSI network on the host the IP address of 2040 and standard submask. Next, finish. Okay, so we've got our iSCSI kernel set up here. The next step is to look at the software iSCSI initiator. This is found on the storage adapters. If we scroll down, we'll find at the very bottom there's an iSCSI software adapter, and it'll always have 38 as the number. Now if this is not showing, then we can easily add it by selecting add at the top here and selecting software adapter. We need to associate this with the VM kernel we've just created for iSCSI. So we do this by selecting properties, network configuration, add, select the iSCSI network and select OK, and select close. We're not going to rescan the adapter because we know at the moment there is no target set up. So we've now set up the iSCSI initiator on the host. We've set up the IP networking on the target on the Netapp. Now we're going to test the connection between the VM iSCSI kernel and the Netapp. Now this is on a different subnet, which means I can't ping either of them directly from my computer because I'll get a request timed out. However, I should be able to putty onto the VM host and ping directly from there. You'll see that I've been refused connection to the VM host. Now this is normal. By default, putty is disabled on the VM host when it's set up. To switch this on, and we should always switch it on only when needed, we go to our security profile, select properties, find SSH, options and start. We'll now be able to raise a putty connection. Now our Netapp was 172.30.20.30. As you can see, we've got success 4 pings. So what this means is that we know that the iSCSI initiator on the vSphere host can communicate with the iSCSI target sitting on the Netapp. The next stage is to carve up some space on the Netapp and present it to the host. So we're now back at the Netapp management screen, and what we're going to do is carve up a very small test piece of storage to present to the VMware host. We're doing this just to make sure all the communication is working properly. We're not necessarily doing anything to best practice at the moment. We're going to come back and go through things in far more detail to make sure we're following best practices. So the first thing we're going to do is to make sure that we are licensed to run iSCSI. So we go into our configuration and select licenses. You will see that we have the licenses for different protocols. By default, after you add the license, this will be disabled. You'll need to just hit enable there. Once you've enabled the license, you need to go into the iSCSI protocol, and you'll need to start the iSCSI protocol. We're now started, the service is running. What we need to do now is make sure that we only have the ports that we're going to be running iSCSI on actually enabled for Iscsi. So we know that it's E0E is the port that we've designated for this 10 gigabit connection. So we're just going to go through and disable the other ports. So we just have the one port which is serving Iscsi. Next thing we'll do is just carve up a small piece of storage to present to VMware. So we're just going to create a flexible volume, and this is going to be for the type of SAN, and we're just going to call this test vol. We're going to thin provision this. We're just going to make it 40 gig big to start with. We're not going to run deduplication yet. We'll sort all that out later. So we can just create this volume. Volume is now online, 40 gig big. The next process is to create the lung. So we're going to now create the lung. We can call this the test lung. It's going to be for VMware. So this is obviously what the host is, because that's what it's going to be stored on. This is what the host is, what it's going to be stored on, not necessarily what the guests are going to be. We're going to thin provision the lung as well, and we're going to put the same size as the volume. Now we can also create a volume from the lung, but we've already created our volume, so we'll select it here. We're going to create the Iscsi initiator. The initiator is the link between the lung we've carved up and the host we're going to present it to. We have to tell Netapp the unique address of the host that we want to access that lung. Now traditionally you would maybe only have one lung to one server, but obviously within VMware the whole point is that each host can share the underlying storage, so in the event we lose a host, another host can pick that data up. So we would have to go through and set up initiator for every server on every lung that we're going to create. This is where initiator group comes in. Initiator group allows us to take all the individual hosts, put them into a single group, and then we can authorize a lung to that group. And this will reduce a lot of work in the future. So we're going to start off by creating an initiator group. We're going to call this out VMware host group. Obviously the operating system is VMware. This is for Iscsi. And this is where we need to add the initiators. Now to add the initiator we need to go to VMware, find our storage adapters, find our software adapter, hit properties and copy. And paste this in here. And create. We can now map this initiator to the lung we've created. We can optionally give it a number, or we can let it generate one automatically. I prefer to always give the numbers. So our lung has been created, and we have associated this with the initiator group here, which has one initiator in our VMware host. Okay, we can now switch back to our VMware server. And under storage adapters, find our software adapter, hit properties and add dynamic discovery. Here we need to enter the Iscsi target IP address. This is the one that we gave our Netapp earlier. And hit close. We're now going to rescan the adapters for any storage that's available. If we select paths here, we can now see that there, on lung 1, is a lung presented by the Netapp. If we go to our storage and hit add lung, we'll see that we have got our Netapp lung. We can create it in the normal way, give it a name, And now, what we now need to do is go back step by step and start building on what we've done so far to create best practices. What we've now done is created a simple lung that's presented to a single host. The plan now is to go back and take each step individually to start locking this down to best practices, making it secure and robust, the kind of stuff that's required for a production environment. I'm James Sillett, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any comments or questions, you can contact me by any of the means shown below.